So today what I'll be doing is sharing a few highlights to ExxonMobil. I think most of you know the pedigree, so it'll be very brief, but Andy asked me to include it. Then I'll talk about management systems in general, how we have applied management systems to help us as a corporation manage risk at our company, and then what we've seen as some of the benefits, both short-term, long-term, as well as how do you sustain those benefits and operate as we go forward. And then I'll wrap up with just a couple key highlights to close with. If we think about ExxonMobil, obviously we are very active in the energy industry, and in fact we're one of the few companies that is still fully integrated. We have a very strong upstream exploration producing operation both for oil and gas. We also have a very large installed base of refineries around the globe in many different countries. And we have a very active and productive petrochemicals operation. And we feel, and I think we've demonstrated through our performance on a consistent basis, that it's the integration of those three key components that bring us competitive advantage and allow us to differentiate as well as to truly exploit technology. And as you know, ExxonMobil is truly a company that is very much committed to technology, investment of the technology. We have a very aggressive capital investment program, and we have I'm one of very many engineers at our company. And so I think that combination of the integrated business, the commitment to technology, and the ongoing risk management is fundamental to all of us. Now I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk about continuous improvement in the risk management process. And I think if we all think back, and one of the things I just wanted to mention, that yes, I'm, if you will, sort of the catalyst speaking from ExxonMobil, but I think much of what I'm going to be saying is common to all of us. And if you will think of me as a stimulant for us all to step back and reflect on what are we doing, how are we doing, and how can we share that. If you look back in the 60s and the 70s, I think most of the industry was very much focused on facilities, engineering, and things of that dynamic to provide safe, secure operations. And we saw performance improve. Well, it improved for a while and then started to asymptote. And so I think ExxonMobil, along with many of you, stepped back and said, what else can we do? And we said, well, wait a second. We've got good equipment. We've got good designs. People need to operate them better. And so we got into the procedures and the practices mode and put together SHE programs. And I think as an industry, we saw performance continue to improve, and then it started plateauing again. And at that point, I think, we were all seeing significant motivation from internal management to improve, but also external from our shareholders, from the public, from the neighbors and the communities we work in. And we said, okay, we've got the facilities, we've got the procedures, what are we missing? And in my words, I think we were missing the hearts and the minds of our employees. And that's where we put together a management system to not only to say how to do, what to do, but to motivate, if you will, and reinforce the beliefs. And I think we are continuing to improve, but we still have a ways to go. Why management systems? I think management systems can be a very effective way to manage change, to drive consistency. And I think yesterday one of the colleagues that was speaking in the cybersecurity forum said, a system is not a series of checklists. It's not a form. It's not something you pull out, you check the box, but it's structure. It's discipline. It's a platform where you can sustain ongoing performance as well as identify opportunities for continuous improvement. And having that structure allows the system to take an organization beyond the current management chain, the operations chain, etc. And when it is internalized and it becomes more than a poster on the board, a checklist, a booklet, then it becomes an operating philosophy. And you can tell it, you can see it as you go from plant to plant, country to country, business to business. It's a common way of thinking, a common way of behaving, and it allows a company of our size to have truly some of the economies of scale. Our risk management framework has been embodied in a management system called Operations Integrity Management System, OIMS for short, and I'll go into a little bit of the detail associated with that. So what is OIMS? Not surprising, since it's a management system. It's structured, it's disciplined. It allows us to manage risk, always paying attention to security, safety, health, and the environment. It's a corporate-wide commitment. It's consistent across the country and across all the businesses. It complies with international standards as well as local regulations and laws. The OIMS management system has 11 key elements, and in fact, we have some booklets outside later on. I'm going to just be hitting the highlights. As I promised Andy, I would just give the overview, not the details. But our OIMS system has 11 key elements. It starts with element number 1, leadership is a driver. And leadership in this context is not defined as the senior manager, the middle manager, the second line supervisor. It's all of us. And we expect our folks to behave credibly. We expect them to take action when needed. We expect them to have the resolve to see it through, and we expect them to be engaged at all times. You know, the acronym is CARE, but it's really a way to behave. Then we've got the other 9 elements that are embodied in how we operate on a day-to-day basis. The second element talks about risk assessment and management. We've got facilities design and construction, and actually one of my colleagues will be talking about that later, and so we'll leave that for him. Information documentation is included, as well as personnel training, operations and maintenance, management of change, third-party services, individual incident investigation and analysis, as well as community awareness and emergency preparedness. I'd like to draw your attention to a couple of them. Obviously, element number 2, risk assessment and management. That's the title of the talk, and you might say, oh, well, Pat, that's all there is to risk management. No, that's a component. Our folks need to be actively identifying hazards, actively assessing the consequences, as well as the probability, and then you put those together to identify the risk management approach, and then we need to steward the gap closures. We identify risks at local levels, at site levels, regional, and stewarding the closures of those is really important to ensuring improved performance. Personnel and training, how does that play into this? Obviously, our folks need to know how they're doing their job, when they need to apply different skills, different knowledge. I think our company is similar to many of the rest of you. We don't have a dumbbell curve, but let me tell you, it's not a flat curve. We still have many folks who are significantly experienced with gray hair, less hair, many folks who have come in from universities in the last 5 and 10 years. And instilling that experience in that very young community is key. And so we have significant focus on formal training programs, mentoring, and accelerated development to ensure that a business that has significant numbers of risks, a corporation that is very large, our folks are knowledgeable, they're consistent, and we get this common behavior throughout. I think the other thing that's a real big one for us is managing change. And I think a big key to managing change is initially identifying a change should occur or is about to occur. And I think oftentimes when we reflect back in our industry, when an incident did occur, it was often because a person or a group of people did not recognize the change was coming or didn't quite believe the data and waited for more data to see if that change was real. And so I think that's one of the things we spend a lot of time with, is training our folks to understand what is stable operation, what is static technology, and then say if there's going to be a change, whether it's due to a change in business environment, it's due to a change in operating environment, or there's a new technology that can provide many of those benefits we talked about earlier, that we, in a very thoughtful and organized fashion, manage that change. Making sure people are trained, making sure people know how to respond, making sure we know the risks. And so one of the things that we've spent a lot of time with is to train, teach, motivate folks. If you think there's a change, stop and think. Assess the potential consequences. How do we get people engaged? How do we get them prepared? And when we do that, we do see the reliable, predictable performance, whether it's out of new technology or out of an operating staff. But when you miss it, or you wait for a couple more points, or, oh, you know what, that gauge is always a little off and I'm not going to worry about it, that's when we find ourselves in times of concern. So not to preach, but you can tell I've got a little passion on that topic. And then I think, as with any management system, you can plan, you can do, but if you don't review and close the loop, then your performance is going to be static at best and often regress. And so we actually conduct in our organization internal self-assessments every couple years. We then have facilitated assessments external to the operating unit. And we then aggregate those learnings from the individual assessments. That allows a site to focus its improvement efforts, but then it also allows us as a corporation to step back and say, is this framework adequate? Is it driving the improved performance, or do we need to have some improvement? And I'll talk about that a little later. So I think some of the benefits that we've been experiencing, and again, this is an ExxonMobil only, I think many of you in the room are seeing similar, is that we are improving in safety performance, we are running more environmentally responsibly, and security, and I talk about physical. Yesterday we heard a lot about cybersecurity, and a big threat and something that we all need to pay attention to. And we find we have a consistent commitment across the organization. In addition, reliability, as you can imagine, would improve. Compliance, people understand their processes. You can't identify a change unless you know what's status quo. We facilitate the sharing. With a company as big as we are, with as many languages and cultures, sharing is not easy. Having a common vocabulary, a common framework, facilitates that and allows us to learn and grow together. You might say, okay, so Pat, you guys wrote this management system almost 20 years ago. You're done, right? No. Sustaining and improving on a continuous basis is important. So I think what we have determined is that line management and ownership is key, and keeping that group motivated, engaged, and behaving in a credible fashion is very important to motivate and to lead our employees. The structure and the discipline we find very effective. I talked about the importance of the stewardship. If you measure it, you can manage it. If you can manage it, you can improve it. And I think it's a logical, continuous. And then I think a couple things that we've learned, as I mentioned, we talk at the site level, what are the risks, how can they be managed, how can they be performance improved, but from a system level, what we found is a couple different evolutions, if you will, of our OIM system. Shortly after the merger, Exxon and Mobil both had risk management systems. We brought them together, and how do we identify a common vocabulary in a huge corporation? And we personalized, nobody gets hurt. And so safety was everybody's business, and I think that was something, one of the first common ties that pulled us together. Then we talked about, okay, safety day in, day out, environmental. We talk about investment, we talk about performance, what's legally regulated versus something that should be addressed. And that was much more, I would say, strategic. And so we embarked upon an effort to protect tomorrow by behaving responsibly today. And so that allowed us to, I would say, increase the focus on environmental security. Post 9/11, huge wake-up call for America, huge wake-up call for the globe. And so a lot of focus was on physical security for the first couple of years, and I will tell you now, cybersecurity is a biggie. And so evolving that as the business needs. And then the last area, or most recent, I shouldn't say last, but the most recent area is not only taking responsibility for your own safety, but actively caring for your peers. If I'm walking down the hall, I'm about to go down the stairs, and I've got, 2 cups in both hands, I hope, number one, I stop, take the elevator. But just in case I forget, that one of my peers says, hey, Pat, you know what, you're about to do something at risk. How can I help you? Did you recognize the hazard? What can we do together? Conversely, if I'm in the plant and I see someone who's looking, they're starting to hurry, they're not doing things as rigorously as they should, I care about that person. I reach out and I share my observations and ask what we could do collectively. And so this take care of yourself, take care of your peers is something that we have found to be very helpful in instilling this type. And it's very interesting that a lot of my peers will find that you take care of your peers, you go home and you take care of your family. And some of the children of ExxonMobil parents, you can spot them a mile away, and their risk management, check it out ahead of time. But and I think this approach that we use with safety, security, health, and environment has also been translated in our global reliability systems, as well as our product and process quality systems. So I think to close, all of us in this room understand that for us to operate, our license to operate is embedded in our strong, ongoing commitment to secure, safe, health, and environmental operations. That's common for all of us, and it's a core value. And in addition to believing it's a core value and being committed today, we all need to be collectively committed to continuously improving and sustaining those improvements in a systematic fashion. Line management, all employees need to own this, need to make it part of their individual commitment, their behavior, and at the end of the day, a system is not a checklist, it's not a glossy brochure, it's not a cute poster, but it's a way of thinking, and it's the execution and the belief that brings us to the improved performance. So I'd just like to say thank you very much for your time. Appreciate your attention, and look forward to talking to you when I join the panel later on. Thank you very much.